Welcome to another episode of Sober on a Drunk Planet. So I am very honoured to have Emily on today. We're going to be talking about her past, about her reasons why she wanted to give up drinking, and all the things she's doing in sobriety. And there are a lot of things she does in sobriety, which is what it's all about, to be fair, at the end of the day. And also the Sober Book Club. It would be rude not to point that out that she runs. A great idea, getting people to read sober books, but rather than me get anything wrong, I'll pass over to Emily just to talk about her background. But hi, Emily, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm coming from my bed this evening, nice and comfy and cozy. This is like the sober life summed up.
Yeah, it's nice just to chill out rather than be like five shots down on a, what
Yeah,
day is it, Wednesday?
yeah, definitely.
So just to give everyone an idea then of, I think it's always quite nice to understand your background,
Yeah.
um, where you are, and then going up to the point where you decided to stop drinking and how that all sort of came about.
Yeah. Okay. So I was sort of like a party girl. And I used to drink quite a lot as a teenager. And then that sort of escalated into taking drugs as well. And then when I was at university, I was horrifically depressed. And the only way I knew how to combat that was through drinking. It's such an easy thing. Everyone's doing it. It's so normalized. So I was like, I'm going to drink. This makes me feel slightly better. Um, and then that was just a coping mechanism that I had through until I got sober. I just would drink because I was depressed. Um, the moment or I had quite a few like rock bottom moments or like moments where I realized that I needed to stop. But by the time that I realized that, I was sort of already in like active addiction where I felt like I actually physically couldn't stop. Um, so I was in hospital quite a lot. I was like in and out of hospital. I had like suicide attempts. Sorry, it's gonna get a bit dark, but I had suicide attempts um psychosis episodes as well, so like hearing voices and seeing things and all of that. And I had an episode over 2 years ago now that was particularly terrifying, and I was in hospital for 8 hours in quite a severe state of psychotic delusion, and it was just awful. Like it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life, and it was just completely terrifyingly like numb. Like that's how I felt. Like I just felt terror throughout my whole body. And after that, when I came out, I knew that I just had to. I was like, right, I felt the worst that I've ever felt, and now I don't want to feel this anymore. Like I was taking drugs, like I said, to self-medicate from this depression, but actually that ended up for me feeling worse. I was like, this isn't working anymore. I need to get sober and I need to recover. Like I felt like I didn't have a choice. And yeah, so that was sort of like the big moment for me where, yeah, I was just like, I need to do this. And then ever since then, somehow I managed to do it. I think I relapsed a couple of times, but it was never like as bad. And I never like went back into psychosis or back into hospital. I got therapy. I started going to the gym, eating healthier. I started going sea swimming as well. I love sea swimming. It's one of my like things that like really saved me. And yeah, that's pretty much my story. And here I am now, still alive to tell the tale.
Yeah, it's so just picking up on the point around psychosis, because I don't think enough people understand it. So,
Mm.
my experience of psychosis was when I was in rehab, and there was an 18-year-old guy that got psychosis from smoking too much weed.
Mm.
And we're sat there. This might sound a bit funny, but there are varying forms of psychosis. And we're
Mm.
sat there, and he's trying to cut up his food with a carrot and a fork.
Mm.
Um, but that, and when you spoke to him, I mean, at the time, I was in a world of pain in my own life, so I wasn't there to judge anyone. but he was so adamant that he had a knife in his hand and he was cutting up his food, but
Mhm.
he had a carrot. And when you're in a psychiatric ward with everyone who's got their own nuances, it is something like a carry-on film. But it can be like you said, you're in a psychotic state for 8 hours or so. But can you just sort of explain how that felt and what happened?
Yeah, so well, I can explain the last episode that I had a little bit to you. Actually, no, I'll explain. At first, I didn't know what psychosis was. And I think it's one of those mental health symptoms that is still a bit taboo, just like, addiction is still a bit taboo, and drugs and alcohol and being sober. It's still a bit taboo. Not many people truly understand it. And when I first started hearing voices and stuff, I didn't know what was happening to me. Like at first, it would just be like someone saying my name or like having a conversation with someone and like me talking back to them and then being like, what? And like, because I thought that they'd said something, but they hadn't actually said. So that was sort of how it started. But the very last episode I had when I was in hospital, it felt like the hospital staff were all like actually hitting me. And I kept sort of like, I had to like cover my face or like cover myself. And I just remember crying and just screaming because I actually could see them like coming towards me, like feel them hurting me. And yeah, it was just the weirdest, most horrific thing. And again, this was when I didn't really, I knew that I had experienced psychotic episodes before, but I wasn't as clued up on them as I am now. So I didn't fully understand what was happening. And I genuinely believed that that was real. And it was, yeah, as I said, it was just horrible.
It's scary stuff. So psychosis was the reason why I decided to check into rehab because I
Mm.
did a lot of coke. I don't know whether you did coke and all the other drugs as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
But you can appreciate like the lack of sleep and the staring at the white walls.
Mm,
And I did that 7 days a week for the best part at the end for about 7 months. I slept 3 days a week,
mm.
and your mind starts
It
losing
really does.
losing the plot.
Hmm.
You need your 7 8 hours sleep a day. That's what I love now.
Yeah.
But it was scary. Like you just sort of prang out that the police are going to break down the door. I don't move off the sofa for about 10 hours,
Mm.
snorting half a line of coke because I'm so paranoid.
Yeah.
Uh, and I guess to some extent is paranoid schizophrenia as well. That you're thinking
Yeah.
I'm turning into this split personality,
Hmm.
and it just feels so normal when you're in it.
Yeah, like when you're in it, you don't understand that you're in it. You think that that's all real and that's all happening. And like I was hearing like whispers and like so many voices. And like I was like, where are these people? Like, where are they? Like, what am I hearing? And I was thinking, I had moments where I would be like at home in my bed, like I am now, and I would think that there was people like outside my window, even though I'm on the top floor, which is,
Yeah, and that's exactly everything I had. I was
yeah.
on top floor
Mm.
apartment I used to have, and I used to go to hotels because I was so scared of being in the top of
Oh,
my own house. So I
wow.
thought I could do drugs in hotels instead. Bizarre.
Yeah.
And it's funny looking back the things that we used to do. So in terms of your drinking, then were you drinking and then got into drugs, and then did drugs take over, or was it just always a bit of a
Um,
mix?
at first it was drinking, and then it was mainly the drugs, and I sort of like drinking was almost not easier, but easier for me to give up compared to the drugs. So yeah, it was more the drugs towards the end.
And was that coke and everything else that went?
Coke, MDMA, ketamine, speed.
I mean,
Um,
just when people say ketamine, I've one experience of it. It's fucking horrible.
yeah.
Sitting in a K hole, and then I knew people that would have it every week, and I was like,
Yeah.
why? It just doesn't make it. It just thinking back, it is self harm at the worst level. You're taking a horse tranquilizer to sort of suppress
I
every
know.
emotion that you've ever felt.
I know. It is wild what we do to our bodies. But, like you say, it is self-harm. I actually, like when I got sober, reframed that in a way because I never wanted to die and I never wanted to harm myself. I only wanted to feel good. Like that's re
Mm.
truly what I wanted. I wanted to escape the pain that I was feeling into, I wanted to go towards pleasure, which is weird when you think about it like that, because actually you are harming yourself.
Yeah, and that's, I think you said that you went to therapy. Now, I
Mm.
think I plug therapy in every book that I've done because it's been such a massive thing for me, for someone who never asked for any help from anyone. I then suddenly had some of the world's best therapists when I was in rehab. So, what was your experience with therapy?
Well, at first when I had therapy, I was still really paranoid. So I was like, I hate this. And like I was sort of trying to be careful of what I said because I thought that like I was going to go back to hospital after having like that really horrible experience. Like that was the worst thing for me to go back into hospital. So when I first had the therapy, I was super, super anxious and still super paranoid. But after like I had a 12-week program, like when I got to the end of the 12 weeks, I did feel a little bit better. And then after, because it was CBT therapy that I had at first, after that, I went into life coaching with a life coach that I have on Instagram called OA Coaching. And she was just like phenomenal. And I think because it wasn't like a person from the hospital or the NHS or anything too clinical like that, it was easier
Threatening.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how have you found life coaches? So, just to CBT's cognitive behavioral therapy, where that is
Yeah.
very much you're trying to rewire how you talk to yourself. Is that fair
Yeah.
enough?
Yeah,
So,
the
it's
thoughts and
in a monologue saying,
mm,
I used to be terrible at everything when I was in addiction. So my inner monologue was a bit like, you're useless, you can't do this, you can't do that. And CBT, they work through by trying to get you to be more positive to yourself.
yeah. And look where those thoughts come from. And it goes kind of like back into your childhood and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you find it useful or not really?
I did find it useful. Like after I got over my paranoia, I did find it useful, yeah.
And that's the thing. I think therapy, it takes sometimes a few attempts. Not everyone always clicks with their first
Mm,
therapist either. So it's a
yeah.
case of always trying to work on it. But then you went into life coaching, and that's different, I guess, to the extent that
Mm.
you're more forward looking,
Yeah.
because a life coach is very much let's look at 8 areas of your life. How are we going to improve these, and what are your goals?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it was away from sort of that like more clinical sort of hospital and doctors and all that. And I felt like I just felt more comfortable with life coaching. And it definitely was more like CBT went back into the past and your thoughts. Life coaching went a little bit into that, but it was more about like what's in your present and your future, which I really liked because I was obviously in a state where I just didn't want to think about my past because of all the stuff that I'd been through. So it was really actually refreshing having the life coaching after the CBT and thinking like more forwardly.
Yeah, and then I guess that brings us on to um, the things that you do in sobriety. So it's nice to have a guest on where there's probably more focus on all the amazing things you do in sobriety, rather
Yeah.
than I quite like not concentrating too much on
Mm,
the past, because I think sobriety is such a beautiful thing for people to start living the life that
mm,
they were never going to do while they were hungover and depressed for most of it. So
yeah.
what have you got going? Should we start with the sober book club?
Yes, let's start with the sober book club. So when I was 6 months sober, it was in lockdown when I first got sober, and it was coming up to the summer, and I live on the street where all the bars and clubs are. It's a great place to live when you're
Uh,
sober. And so I was getting really panicked, and I was like, oh no, how am I gonna stay sober in the summer? Like, I need something. And I started reading again when I got sober, and I thought, why not start a book club? So that's how it started. And it was sort of like to help me. as all around me was like going to be drinking, I was like, right, I can go somewhere where that isn't going to be a thing.
And what was some of the, so were you reading quick lit that sort of got you into the idea of the sober book club?
I think I actually read my first Quit Lit with the Sober Book Club, and that's how it started because I wanted to go into reading Quit Lit. And the first one we read was The Joy of Being Sober. What's it called?
The Unexpected Joy of Being
Unexpected
Sober by
Joy.
Catherine
Catherine Gray.
Gray. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the first one. That's what we started with, and that was my first Quit Lit book.
Yeah, I think I've only read one or two myself, but I think Catherine's was the most
Mm.
relatable because I think she lives in London and sort of had all that corporate upbringing and drinking and drugging and everything else.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that you got the sober book club because there are loads of sober writers now.
Mm,
So you must be spoiled for choice in terms of the books that you look at.
yeah.
Um, but how does it operate? Because I'll put a link in
Yeah.
um, when I post this so people can join and do all the things of reviewing books and all that as well.
Okay. So basically, all you have to do is just to be a member, just to follow us on the Instagram page. We read a different Quit Lit book every month. And then we have the meeting on the last Sunday of each month at 5 o'clock UK time. And I think that's 9 a.m. Pacific time. But yeah, you can sign up to our newsletter as well. We have a newsletter and we have a website. We even have a Spotify now.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
but all the links and everything are all on the Instagram.
And then what was the book that you did last month?
Last month was the Bryony Gordon book,
Is that
Glorious
Glorious Rock
Rock
Bottom
Bottom. Yeah. And this month we're reading Russell Brand's
Recovery?
Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions.
So did you ever go to AA or do any of that?
I went to NA.
Okay, in more of a
Yeah.
chilled out vibe.
I don't know. Well, I've never been to AA, so I don't
Oh,
know.
okay, yeah. So I think I've been to all of them pretty much, but I
Yeah.
think the general consensus is with NA you tend to have more chilled out people.
Really?
AA tends to be a slightly older crowd, and then
Okay.
I couldn't stand Cocaine Anonymous because it was just a bunch of nutters. It just
Yeah.
reminded me of myself when I was on it.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think NA is good because it sort of covers everything. Whereas AA can sometimes be a bit, you're either an alcoholic or you're not invited. So did you still go to NA?
No, so I started going to NA actually last year because I didn't really have anyone sober around me. I only had the people that I met through the book club and online and that community, which is great, but I felt like I needed that face-to-face sort of thing. So I went last year and I went for about 3 or 4 months, but then on the night that NA was, I now do a different thing. I do a dance class, so that obviously took precedence.
And that's a good thing. You just using your time to where you want to do it. So when you were doing the NA, did you feel pressured or anything into doing it, or
No, I just went along and yeah, it was nice. And I got my 2 year key ring, well, my multiple years key ring, which was nice and had cake and stuff. But yeah, I think I needed it because I had a lot of stuff that I was still holding in. And sometimes when you talk to people who aren't sober, or haven't had like psychosis or the journey that I've had, you can say some things and they're like, what are you talking about? And people don't really understand. So I was sort of craving that community of people that got it. And when I opened up and I spoke the first time I went and ended up crying, but everyone was just like, yeah, we get it. We've been there. We understand. And that was such a like confirming moment for me, or just like a really comforting moment for me.
there's nothing more therapeutic than crying in front of in a room full of random strangers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think I must have done that for the best part of about 4 months after I came out of rehab, pretty much every time.
Wow.
Which it shows it's needed, isn't it? I think like when you've gone through something so personal,
Mm,
and the thing is, the majority of people don't get it. I mean, most of the people live in this bubbles, and I still find it alien that not everyone's addicted to alcohol and drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still don't believe people when they can say they can just have one or two.
Mm,
I think it's a conspiracy against me.
no.
Probably still some paranoia in there as well.
Yeah.
Um, so, what else have you been up to then since your sobriety?
Okay. So I my main thing that I do is write. I do freelance writing, and I'm also writing a book called On the Other Hand, which is a book about my disability. I was born with one hand. So that's just like a little memoir about my life experiences and all the funny sort of things that have happened. And there's also a chapter on there called Drugs, because that was obviously a really big part of my life. And I talk about that, my journey with drugs and sobriety in there as well. I'm working on another project called Swimming for Sanity because I am a wild swimmer, and that's something that I found on my sober journey. And that's just a book about like my personal story with recovery and how wild swimming and cold water therapy has sort of helped me. I'm working on a few poetry collections as well. Um, I also work for two different charities. One of the charities is for people with limb disabilities, so similar to myself, like one arm or no arms or fingers missing, or it can be anything. It's any sort of limb difference. I'm on the board for that, so I'm a trustee. And I also, the other charity that I work for is called George's Voice, and they're a mental health charity for women and girls aged 18 to 25, and I facilitate their support group.
Wow, so you really do have a lot going on in sobriety, don't you?
Yeah, I feel like, so when I got sober, I was saying to you, like before we started the podcast, it felt like I was being reborn and like sort of doing everything for the first time. And this is actually something that I spoke about in my life coaching sessions. And Olivia said to me one time, she was like, "Do you think you're making up for lost time?" And I just went, "Yes, I am. Like, I just want to do everything." But I'm learning at the minute that I can't do everything because I started a counseling course last year, and I did the introductory course, and I was going to go on to do further education in counseling to become a counselor. And I just realized with everything else that I've got going on in my writing projects and stuff, that I just can't do it at the minute, which is a shame. But I know that writing is where my passion is, and that's what I really want to do. So,
Yeah, brilliant. And that's the thing as well. I think it's finding out, like, I'm similar to you. I do
mm,
too many things
yeah,
because to some extent the energy and the passion and the purpose is there now,
mm,
whereas it was lacking for me in addiction.
yeah,
I was in a job I hated. I was drinking and drugging because I hated the job. It was stressful.
mm,
But then when I got sober, talking about channeling energies, and as hippie as it sounds, that's like the superpower you get from sobriety is knowing where to put your energy, because your energy is either going to grow or some person's going to come and suck the life out of you.
mhm,
And that's just, yeah, the experience with it is use the time, but then ultimately we'll find out whether we suffer from burnout like I have the last
oh
four
no,
months.
oh no,
Um, but that's the thing. I've always struggled with balance. So even though these things are all positive, like the body can't differentiate between good stress and bad stress.
do you think
Uh,
that's like part of your addictive personality?
yeah, it's funny. Like if I say to people that I am an addict in everything that I do,
Mm,
they sort of probably have this preconception that if they met me, I'd be some ADHD hyper person, but I'm not.
mm,
I'm quite a laid back, chilled out person that just seems to not know when to stop something.
mm.
Um, but it's getting better with age.
I
Um,
like to call it slaying life.
yeah, and that is it. I think you'll know yourself better than anyone else exactly when that slaying then becomes hard work again,
Yeah.
and taking too much on. But that's just part of life, isn't it? I think having a life coach is a great way to have that accountability as well. because they're able to reflect back to you things that you probably know yourself already,
Yeah.
but until you verbalize it to someone,
Hmm.
it then makes more sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of the cold water swimming, then, because
Mm.
that sort of shot to fame a bit more with the Wim Hof,
Half, yeah.
who's been around for donkeys. I've
Mm.
always known about him, but his books have really taken off because there's
Mm.
just more media spotlight on it. I think a lot of celebrities are doing it now. Russell
Mm.
Brand does it as well.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? And then what changes do you see? I guess
Mm.
what is it? Why why go into cold water? I hate cold showers. So for
Mm.
me, I look at people that do the cold water swim and I'm like, great for you, but not for me.
It's funny that you say Wim Hof actually, because he's the reason that I thought to ever do the cold water therapy. I watched a documentary of his during lockdown. This was when I first tried to go sober, and I managed 6 months. But during that time, before I relapsed again, I started swimming. Um, and I think that it's the thrill and it's the rush, and it that was the closest that I could get to the thrill and the rush that I was seeking through other things.
Yeah,
And I remember posting on Instagram about it and saying that I'm still chasing the high, I'm just chasing the healthier high.
it's a
And
lot healthy.
that's sort of how I describe it really. It's just that sort of feeling of shock and feeling of panic that I seem to like and crave. Yeah, I absolutely love it. Although I don't, when I started doing it, because I live by the beach, so I just sort of went to the beach every day. And then on days when it was stormy, I tried to do cold showers and I was like, no, this feels wrong. Like that's too much. Cold showers is too much, but jumping in the sea in the morning is fine.
Yeah, again, rather you than me. It obviously helps living by the sea, so it's a nice to have that locality as well. So,
Yeah.
in terms of getting your rush through cold water swimming, what else? Is there anything else that you've managed to cram into your sobriety?
Yes, so I started working out as well. This was just before I managed to get sober. I got, so 2 weeks before lockdown, I got a gym membership, and then lockdown happened, and I was like, oh, it's not meant to be. Like, the world doesn't want me to exercise.
Uh,
Then when I managed to get sober, like, exercise was just great. And it's another way to get to that place where I feel like super amazing and fulfilled. And I've recently started running as well. Like, I used to hate running. So I used to do a kickboxing class and I used to go to the gym. But this year I started running and now I love it. I don't know how I love it, but I love it.
do you get into that trance-like state that people, again, not me, I hate running, um, that get into it and it's just a nice way to zone out, I guess.
Yeah. And I always feel good afterwards. It's like a just that feeling of achievement and accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think it's like I was a PT for a number of years before I decided to do publishing and get fat again. But there's no one's ever complained after a run, after a weight session, after kickboxing, Muay Thai, any of the sports. We know that exercise is good for your health, for your emotional health, for your mental health.
Mhm.
Um, Yet people will always advertise pills and potions over eat
Mhm.
well, sleep well, move, and talk
Yeah.
about your problems with
It
people.
it really is that basic. And I'll tell you a story actually. One time when I was at university and I was in like my probably the most depressed that I've been, I went to the doctor and I said to her that I was feeling depressed, expecting to like get some, I think I was on some sort of antidepressant, but I wanted a different one or something. But she just wrote down on a piece of paper, diet, sleep, exercise, and then gave it to me. And I thought she was joking. I was like, what? I was like, like, what are you doing? That's just not right. And now I look back at that and I'm like, oh my God. That's all it was.
It's a bit of a catch-22. So I think I've suffered a bit with depression over winter with the burnout from work and
Mm,
just shitty English weather.
mm,
And it's probably the most depressed I've felt since I've got sober. But
mm,
but I've done the simple things. I've got Lindsay, my nutritionist. She's been sober for 8 years,
mm,
and then got back into exercise. But it's all right for the doctor to slip a note, but when you're deep in a depression and your mind is holding you prisoner from,
mm,
I've got a gym at the end of my garden that I've built. It's literally 5 footsteps. Yet all winter I've just been having such an argument in my own head.
mm.
Um, but as soon as that it's got lighter in the mornings and I've made those few things, I feel 10 times better. My whole
Yeah.
personality starts coming back out.
Mm,
I have a haircut, have a shave, and then feel like I can tackle the world again. And it really is as simple as try and do something that gets you moving, whether it's yoga or just going for a walk, and
mm,
then eating well, not having Deliveroo. I mean, anything from Deliveroo, apart from salad from a co-op shop, is basically terrible for me. Um,
yeah.
and then yeah, just talking about problems. Like now,
Mm,
I'm I promote people within the Facebook community as well and in the books to talk about their problems. I mean, that's a big weight off your shoulder, just
mm.
telling someone
Yeah,
what you're feeling.
yeah, that's true. Definitely.
Um, so I think we're coming up to 30 minutes. I have now purchased the full business Zoom. Just seems to be a running thing that I keep mentioning it in all the podcasts. So Sober Book Club, go and have a look at it on Instagram,
Yeah.
and then you can join in with that. And yeah, it's been brilliant speaking to you. You've
Thank
got
you.
lots on, which is the whole point of sobriety.
Yes. A wonderful
Inspire
life.
Exactly. It's inspiring what you've been through,
Mm,
and getting sober and doing all those brilliant things.
yeah.
And
Well, likewise.
best of luck with the writing as well. I
Thank
know it can be a bit of a long slog sometimes, but once it's published, you'll be running.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me.
No worries. Right, that's the end of another episode.